this is a Jet Swet kit, which is a 1/2 inch through 2 inch set of stoppers that I utilize when I'm trying to solder onto a water-loaded line. So when I say water-loaded, the pressure's out of it, but it's going to continually drain down and give me problems when I solder, which I'll show you the way to use these here in a second. These are kind of spendy. I think it was a little bit over $200 for a set of 6 of these. Something that the average person and sometimes even the average plumber is not going to have access to or own. But they're definitely worth their money because you can spend a lot of time fighting to solder a line that has water draining down in it, especially if you're in a big building. Like I remember working on a rest home, and we had 2-inch lines that were draining down into a mechanical room, and we spent hours trying to get that thing soldered up by not having a set of Jet Swets. So one thing that you'll commonly hear a lot of people say is just take bread and stuff it in the pipe, and then you can solder, and the bread soaks up the water and plugs it off, plugs the pipe, and keeps it from draining down. I've never tried it. I wouldn't necessarily advise it as the best option, but it is an option. It's been around, the idea of it's been around long enough that I assume that it does work. The hints that I've heard in the past are make sure that you use the cheapest white bread that doesn't have any seeds or grains or none of that whole grain, whole wheat, nothing like that, because that stuff will not break down like you want it to when you go to flush the lines. Also, peel the crust off, and if you do use bread to plug the pipe off, go ahead and take the aerators off of faucets and valves and things like that if you have the ability to. Shower head, anything that's down line of that, take those heads and aerators off to reduce the likelihood of getting a bunch of bread caked in there, because you might solder something up, think you're good to go, and get a call back or find out that your bathroom faucet doesn't work anymore and you're wondering what's happened. You probably got a bunch of bread stuck in the aerator, which is going to be the smallest orifice or opening for water to flow through in the line to get out of the pipe. So just take that precaution, take those off, flush the line out thoroughly, and then you should be good to go. So for this particular example, we're going to imagine that we're going to cut into an existing water line, say for a repair or an addition or something. So we've got our tubing cutter. And if this is a renovation job where there were loaded lines or water in the pipe, we've cut this and we're going to have a lot of drain down, even with hose bibs opened up and faucets and valves and things like that, allowing water to get out of the system. There's still going to be water in here. So we cut it, we run our deburring tool around, get that burr off of there, pull that out, make sure there's no copper in there, and that deburring tool is on our tubing cutter here. Then we're going to take some emery cloth, which is typically it comes in a big roll like this, so you just tear off, about a foot of it or so. And then if you have access all the way around the pipe, you can just clean your pipe like this and work your way around. If you don't have that much access, you can do it, just kind of grip it in your hand and just work around like that. It takes a little bit more time, and there's a chance on this edge here, if you're rubbing your hand like that, you can cut yourself. And this copper, if you do that a lot over a day, your hand's going to turn green from the copper itself. So we've cleaned off our end. I'm not going to go through the whole thing and solder this on, but we've got water running out of here, and we want to put, whatever else on here. So one way to avoid having to try and solder with water in the pipe, which is very difficult to do because that water will continually turn to steam, and as you close up the system, it will actually start blowing the solder out of the joint as you're trying to solder. We'll put flux on here. We'll clean the inside of a ball valve, and in this case we're using a full port ball valve, and a full port ball valve is the same diameter as the pipe that you're attaching it to, so there's no resistance to flow once you put it on there. So we slide that ball valve on there, and this is the trick here, and it is a bit of a spendy tool, and I'll show you the full set, but there's a tool called a Jet Swet. And basically what it is it's a rod, threaded rod, and it's got this aluminum or rubber plug here. And what you do is you put your full port ball valve on, you slide this into the pipe so that rubber stopper is back up here, and you start to tighten it down. And this aluminum shaft here pushes down on that rubber plug. Right now it's still loose, and it'll get tight enough to where I won't be able to do it by hand anymore. But I'll tighten it up, and I'm going to get a small crescent wrench here. And if you notice, this handle has this 90-degree hinge on it, so that you can use that as a bit of a wrench to hold on to it. So as I'm tightening it up, it's still loose. Now it's starting to grip there. So this end has expanded to the inside diameter of the pipe. Turn it a little bit more, and it's in there solid. That effectively has taken and plugged the pipe back up here beyond or above the line where I'm trying to solder at this joint here. That will hold any drain down water on that side, allow me to solder this fitting without any drain down water running through and potentially affecting this solder joint. Once I'm done soldering, keep your hands off to the side because that water can be warm. I would recommend waiting until this is a little bit cool before doing this, but it doesn't take too much to get this loose enough to pull out. And then you can just pull this back and out. Now, one feature of this handle is that depending on how bad the water is draining down, you could cut it, stick this in here after you've reamed out and deburred the inside of your tubing, plug it off, get it sealed up, and then you can slide the ball valve over the Jet Swet, solder it, pull our Jet Swet out, and there's going to be water running out of here, of course. So now we close this ball valve, we can clean this fitting, and we can plumb in the dry from here on out. Very efficient, effective system, but it is a little spendy. The set itself comes in 1/2 inch through 2 inch sizes. So there are 6 different sizes of Jet Swets in the set. So as far as the actual tools that I carry in my solder tray, I basically carry 2 types of things in my solder tray. What I would consider tools, and then what I would consider consumables. So for tools, obviously I've got my MAP gas torch. I've got tools to cut the tubing. There's what they call a knuckle cutter, which is a very small tubing cutter, because when you're in confined spaces like near a stud or something, this rotates around the pipe, whereas this one will not. Typically, I don't carry a tubing cutter that will cut more than about 1 inch, because typically most houses you're not going to find inch plus pipe. So 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches, 2 inch pipe in a residential house you're not going to find. This is basically a knuckle cutter, but it ratchets. So I don't have to get my hand in there. It snaps over the pipe, I tighten it up, and then I just keep wrenching on it, kind of like a socket set. So these two are very similar. This is made by Reed. These two are made by Rigid. This one is nice because it does have the adjustment. It's got the guide wheels, and then it's got the deburring tool up in the top here. And these little tool sections here are replaceable. And the ones manufactured by General fit in there. I'm fortunate enough to have a good machine or tool supply that actually carries the replacements of these in stock. So this is a General deburring tool, and it's got just a little snap collar, which hasn't been operated forever, so it isn't going to move on me. But anyways, you can pull that down and slide this little piece out and replace it if you need to. So that's how I deburr my pipe. The flux brushes, honestly, these are getting into kind of consumables because they don't last that long. They get really rusty because you are messing with that acid-based flux. Every now and again, you need a little tiny mini hacksaw to get in there and cut copper tubing. This will work. I'll carry a couple of crescent wrenches just in case. Sometimes you've got to move something. A selection of wire brushes. Typically, I like them mostly for cleaning out the inside of fittings. That's my main thing. A file is nice to have because sometimes you get that big bead of solder on something, and it's nice to just knock that off. When I was working as a plumber all the time, I had a Gerber multi-tool, and I just carried that on my belt, and those had really nice files in them. This is a torch guard. I believe it's a Oatly makes them, but it's just a little fabric thing. So if for some reason you do have to solder, you have no choice, and solder really close to something, you can put this in between there. It's made with a fire resistant, I think, glass fiber. They're not super durable, but instead of burning a house down, this is definitely the way to go, and it's a non-asbestos material. Again, a pair of channel locks. I've got my little inspection mirror so I can see the backside of a fitting or underside, so I know that I've got a good solder joint. A spray bottle and a rag. So those are the main tools that I carry in my solder box. One thing that I forgot to mention was if and when I do work with larger diameter copper pipe, I will trade out the cutting wheel on this. Currently this has a plastic pipe cutting wheel, which is very narrow from the edge up to the center, so it cuts deeper. But you can put a reinforced wheel, which is designed for cutting copper pipe. And this is what I would use a lot when we were working with 2-inch lines and things like that. So this is a quick action where you push down, it's got a spring that retracts or pulls the plunger back. You push it forward until it makes contact with the pipe, and then you start screwing it in. And that's how it cuts. So I talked about what I considered the tools on a solder tray. This is my solder tray. I carry spare map gas. These are all consumables. These are things that you're going to have to replace over time as you continue working. I carry map gas. I carry some pipe joint compound or pipe dope. I've got a couple different containers of it. The same stuff, different brand. Actually the same brand. So this is a liquid version of like Teflon tape. I also carry Teflon tape. Anything 3/4 and above, I'll put Teflon tape on a threaded fitting, and then I'll top it off with some pipe dope. And so that's a good way of doing it. I've got a couple different containers of flux, different brands, same thing basically. I've got multiple different rolls of solders. They're all the same style of solder. They're drinking water safe. I've got a large roll of emery cloth, so that's good. Another rag. I've got plenty of these flux brushes up here. Sometimes you'll need a heat-proof grease, which is nice for certain situations. And then I've just got some of these. These are supposed to attach to a cordless drill, and clean the inside of fittings and outside of pipe, but I don't really like them that much. I've used them in the past. And then it's always good to carry a backup striker for your torch, because if the auto igniter in your torch goes out, you're kind of sunk. So anyways, that's the solder tray, tools and consumables. So I hope you enjoyed this video on soldering, desoldering, working with copper pipe. Hopefully it's not as intimidating as it may seem. There are a lot of different options though nowadays, way more than there used to be, and I'll show you some of those options here in a future video. Yeah, thanks for watching. This is Dan with Dan and Sarah Makers. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, share this video, and leave comments if you have any questions, and I'll try and answer them as best I can. Until next time, bye.